Hello and welcome back, yet again, to episode 2 of Recreational Insanity. This is part 2 of a 2-part episode, simply because I felt, why not mess up the continuity of the whole thing in only the second episode? But I remain your host, Liam Larson, and I am presenting this second part of episode 2, in its complete form with limited commercial interruption. Now, why would I feel the necessity to split the episode up into 2 parts, you may ask? And I suppose that'd be a good question. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure myself. I had recorded a different version of this episode where I went on at length and ended up talking myself in circles. And I mean, if you enjoy hearing somebody talk in circles, argue a point, answer a question, and then completely contradict themselves a few minutes later, then you're probably a cruel, sadistic person, and why would you want to listen to something like that? What's wrong with you people? I honestly don't know. I ask myself that question quite a bit. I ask myself what's wrong with me. And the content of this episode that ended up going in circles was about technology. And now, what I've found is you can argue for technology and you can argue against technology. But in the end, it's almost like you're making the same argument. The pros that you can come up with for technology can also be cons to certain people and vice versa. And strangely enough, I get taken by these moods to revisit movies from my childhood. And last year I got taken by a mood and I wanted to rewatch the Robocop films. And again this year, Robocop is in the news because apparently somebody said, hey, let's beautify Detroit by building a life-size Robocop statue. And it became an internet thing. And of course, people are talking about the possible 4th sequel or reboot or whatever that's supposed to be coming in 2013, I believe. But in rewatching these films, I get a lot of the stuff that I missed as a kid. Because as a kid, when I was watching these movies, I was watching them solely for the gore, the violence, and the story. It was a cyborg. It was a robot with a big gun. I didn't really get the social messages and the commentary and the satire. And I can say it certainly planted seeds that I would more easily recognize these things nowadays. But as a kid, I guess it helps if your social satire is given to you by a cyborg with a machine pistol. But yes, watching these films, really, it brought me back to a different time, and it also illustrated how close to the mark they got with some of these things. The first film is just great. It's a masterpiece, if I can use that term, to talk about a film about cyborg police officers. And the second and the third, most people don't like. I do like the second film the best out of the bunch, simply for the storyline. Geez, the third film, entertaining, but with its flaws. And now I'm into the Canadian-made Prime Directive miniseries, which were made for TV. And I've watched these before. I actually think the last time I watched these, they were running them back to back on television. So you could literally sit down and watch all 4 parts if you wanted to, which I don't think I did. I think I caught bits and pieces and eventually got the whole thing. But I'm watching them now, and they're taking the core message of it and combining it with all these other films. Like, you can see aspects of Starship Troopers and Terminator and all these other films being incorporated into the miniseries, which is kind of strange because Paul Verhoeven, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, he did the original Robocop, and he went on to do Starship Troopers and a bunch of other different films. Great films. And watching these miniseries, you can, well, first off, you can tell that they're Canadian. That much is pretty much evident from the actors and the production values, because I don't remember Robocop looking so French Canadian. Not that that's a bad thing. But the aspects that they take from films like Starship Troopers, if you've seen the film, you'll know what I'm saying when I say, do you want to know more? If you haven't, the gist of it is they use little vignettes, little commercials, news items in the film as exposition. And then at the end of these items, there'll be a little window that pops up that says, do you want to know more? It's kind of like, it's an internet thing, you know. Amazon suggests, you know, you liked this book, so obviously you're going to be interested in this completely unrelated object. Something like that. And they do a similar thing to that in the Prime Directive miniseries with MediaNet. And one of the things I found annoying is they took this, but it all goes by so fast that it's really hard to catch some of the more tongue-in-cheek stuff. But the basic gist of it is it's a talking head, and you've got all these little bars going at the bottom that are trying to sell you action figures or memorabilia from a news story, reminding you to purchase the video collection of Robocop's greatest moments, and so on and so on. And we can see a lot of this kind of stuff going on today with the integration of internet and news media and television and all that lovely stuff. And oddly enough, at the end of the second part of the mini-series, where Robocop and his new best buddy, Cyborg, Robocable, are walking off into, well, I can't really say the sunset, into the ruins of old Detroit. And there was a quote, and the quote is, "The danger of the past was that men became slaves. The danger of the future is that men may become robots." And this is certainly fitting for a film about cyborgs and duty and the kind of societal norms and restrictions that are imposed on people, where in the film they're represented as directives and what have you. And they credit this quote to Henry David Thoreau, the guy who wrote about civil disobedience and slavery and Walden. And I thought, wow, you know, that's a great quote. And, you know, I'd like to act all learned and say that I consulted my big book of Henry David Thoreau, but I didn't. I don't actually own a big book of Henry David Thoreau. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. I know of him. My sister, who's better read than I am, has read his stuff. And I thought, well, I'm going to go and I'm going to find where that quote came from. And wouldn't you know it, it's really difficult to track down, because it turns out it's not actually from him. Now, one of my main arguments that I had against technology is that it doesn't do the job that the media that it's replacing did. it informs people, but it doesn't always inform them correctly or completely. And this kind of illustrates my point. The quote is actually from a fella named Eric Fromm. It's ERICHFROMM. If you want to look him up, he has some interesting quotes. And it's part of a larger quote that I did end up finding on the internet here. That does go, the danger of the past was that men became slaves. The danger of the future is that men may become robots. True enough. Robots do not rebel, but given man's nature, robots cannot live and remain sane. They become golems. They will destroy the world and themselves because they cannot stand any longer the boredom of a meaningless life. Now that's a more kind of in-depth idea instead of just the little snippet. And apparently this was written in response to a speech given by a U.S. Congressman, Adlai Stevenson, where he said, "We are not in danger of becoming slaves anymore, but of becoming robots." So where the actual idea came from, I can't really tell you, but I found it kind of striking because these statements were made back in the 50s, 1955, I believe. And here it is, 2011, and I wouldn't say we're becoming robots, or maybe we are. We're digitizing and technologizing, I think I just made that word up, every aspect of our life, from books to music to films. And this is taken as progress, and it is progress. Whether it's a step in the right direction, of course, remains to be seen. And I'm certainly not qualified to make a judgment on that, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, but I do have my opinion. But after reading that quote and thinking of it in regards to the film series, which, if you haven't seen any of the Robocop films, I'd recommend watching them. If you're a proponent of wholesome movies and you're not especially a fan of violence or graphic gore, then you might want to find the theatrical release of Robocop, which was toned down. I believe the original release received an X rating because of all the violence. But it's certainly, I think it stands the test of time, which is kind of sad because it came out in the 90s, 1990, I believe, or 89. And, well, I'm dating myself, but I was 10. And here it is, 2011, I'm watching them again, and Robocop is still, apparently, attracting the hearts and minds of people on the internet because they managed to raise $50,000 to get this statue made, because the big deal on the internet was that the mayor of Detroit responded on his Twitter feed saying that building a Robocop statue wasn't in the plan. It wasn't in the cards for Detroit. And other people took it upon themselves to raise the money to get the statue built. So, insert your comment about Walsh worshipping false gods or fetid calves or whatever you want there. But personally, I think it's rather impressive that people could pull together and do something like this over a fictional character, a machine pistol wielding cyborg cop at that. That we've taken a character that isn't exactly cuddly and politically correct and elevated them to, I won't say godhood, but we put them on a pedestal. what all this has to do with technology and the fact that I had to do a part 2 to this show. Well, it's now Thursday, and I posted part 1 of episode 2 sometime early Monday morning. And in the end, I think the experience of trying to get this second part together, trying to get the point that I was trying to make across about technology and about how we're becoming dependent on it, has really illustrated just how dependent I've become on technology. It's kind of funny. I find it amusing. Maybe you do too. Without technology, I wouldn't be recording this podcast. Without technology, I wouldn't be able to edit it, to upload it, and to seek critiques from other people, to seek comments. And technology is enabling me to practice and to further my prowess in radio land, in podcast land, in technology land, whatever you want to call it. And for that, I'm thankful. Thankful is a funny word, because without technology, as we know it, how would I be recording this and delivering it to the masses? Probably on some kind of analog tape system and doing some sort of pirate broadcast, which is very involved, very complex, and no doubt very expensive. Whereas here, it's a little less complex, but still complex. It's certainly not cheap. I'm sure it's cheap. You can find cheaper ways of doing it than what I'm doing. And in the long run, it's still getting out there. That's the important thing. So, if you're dependent on technology, be happy in your addiction. You're not alone. And when it comes right down to it, do you really think you'd be better off without technology? Do you think you'd be better off without washing machines and televisions and home telephones? Not to mention those of us that are dependent on our Crackberries, our instant messaging, our multiphonic ringtones and digital watches. Would we really be better off without our laptops, without our laser printers, without our flat screen televisions, our high definition, 3-dimensional, stereoscopic, uber resolution monstrosities that we have on our walls? Would we be better off without these? Would we be better off lugging around huge rear projection televisions, which are now thrown out on the corner with our garbage? Cathode ray tubes are nothing more than a boat anchor. And yet, our technology is progressing so quickly that soon all of our flat screens are going to be no good either. They're going to be banished down to the rumpus room, replaced by some new technology. And are we going to be better off without that new technology? I don't know. Maybe that's something that we need to ask ourselves. Let me know what you think about this. Let me know what you think. Post in the comments below. Let me know by email, lablarson, all one word, @live.ca, or on Facebook, just under Liam Larson. Look for the funny-looking bearded guy wearing the funny hat. Anyways, I'd say that does it for this episode. I've gone on long enough. 2 parts of rambling, nonsensical lunacy is all good. So until next we meet, until next you're so bored out of your skull that you have to listen to me go on and on and on about all this. Thanks. Have a good day. Thank you for listening, and again, I remind you, sanity is overrated. Try the alternative.